Welcome to the Messy Middle podcast and radio show presented by Mother and Founder Co. Each month, guests are invited to share their version of the messy middle and the lessons they've learned along the way. Whether you're in the messiness of growing a business, healing from trauma, or navigating the wild world of parenting, this show is a must. We are excited to celebrate the messiness of life and business with you. And now, let's settle in as host Jen Burwell connects us with today's guests.
Well, hello. I am so excited to have my two guests today. It is a different show than we typically have here at Mother and Founder, The Messy Middle, but it is a really important one, and I could not think of two better guests to share some great stories. So today on the podcast, we have Philip La Croix.
Hi.
Hello, who's author and also a knight at medieval times, so we might have to check in about that.
I've got permission.
Okay. Oh, that's good. That's good.
Shouldn't have told us that.
Yeah. And we also have Brett Burwell, who is the Chief Vibes Officer at Douglas & Douglas, who also happens to be my husband.
Yep, the luckiest man around.
The love in the air, man. I'm feeling it.
There's enough
not
for
just
all
you
of
and
us.
me.
Yeah. So I have been begging Brett for a year to come on this podcast, and he refused. And then I told him about Phil and all the cool things he's working on, and he is here. So
You just say medieval times and you got me.
Oh, sweet.
there we go. So I always like to start the show with just a little bit of background, like to share about yourself, where you came from, how you got here in a short amount of time. So Phil, let's start with you.
Okay. Like you said, I've been a knight for medieval times. I started back in 2008. I got into it because I needed a job when I transferred to Cal State Fullerton, and it was originally just supposed to be a job to help me get through college. But I graduated with my bachelor's in theater in 2011 and just kept going because it's too much fun. Mm-hmm. I have so many stories, and you got to reel me in or else we'll take up the entire time.
Good. Brett, tell us about you.
Yeah, originally from Long Island, New York. Moved to Indiana when I was a kid, and talk about a culture shock there. So after like 7 years complaining about living in Indiana, we moved here to Arizona, and I went to high school in Scottsdale at Saguaro, the best football program in the state. And then went to the Conservatory of Recording Arts and Sciences, graduated from there, and tried to get into the music business, did some interning in Brooklyn, and then gave up that dream and went into the boring world of finance for a decade. Had a mental breakdown, and then decided to start my own media production company. So that's how I got here.
Go you.
Yeah, and we're going to get into all of that. That was a very high-level overview. So today I want to talk about mental health as a topic and just your guys' experience. And then, Phil, I know you wrote an incredible book that I was just talking to our mutual friend this morning about, and just how excited she was talking about the story and just the adventure that your character goes on is incredible. But I want to start with just when we talk about mental health, what does that look like for each of you? What comes to mind when we say that word? Because it is like a buzzword, right? So what comes to mind?
Well, when you talk about mental health, at least for me, a big thing is like, I know this is going to sound weird, but I'm an extroverted introvert. Like people will look at me, especially if they come see the show, and I tell them I'm an introvert, they're like, no, you're not. And a big thing that I learned from one of my teachers, Tracy Williams, was that you can't argue with how people feel. I mean, you can think all you want, you don't know what's going on inside that person. And for me, like there is a lot of struggle, especially because like I push myself to go out there and, experience life, but I still need to draw back and recharge my batteries because like, I mean, when I moved out here, I was telling you earlier that I was living in North Phoenix in my own tiny house in the middle of nowhere. And I knew before I moved out here, is like, I have to get out of my comfort zone or else I'm going to turn into a hermit. And like what we're talking about, my main character, he has to deal with a lot of isolation issues, and it really plays with his mind. And I got a lot of inspiration from real life to add into that.
So talk to me a little bit about the isolation. I think is such a key part of people's mental health journey, or when we start to feel when things can be hard. And we've all experienced an event, right? COVID in 2020. And for you being a night, I mean, I don't think there were shows for a while, right?
No, but they were only closed for about 3 months. But here's the
Okay.
thing: literally right before COVID started, I guess I still am a very stubborn horse trainer, and one day I was a little too stubborn. I was on a very very high scale horse, and he was just rearing and rearing and rearing, and I was too stubborn to get off. I was just like, you know what, I'm going to ride this out. But one time, he reared up and he lost his balance and he fell over backwards on top of me.
Oh my gosh.
And my left knee was, he landed on it in such a way where it bent sideways.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
I wouldn't recommend it.
No.
Not a good time.
But I eventually got reconstructive surgery with that, and it's much better. But while I was in lockdown, I was also recovering from that injury as well as writing this book. When I was believe it or not, that was the easiest part because we were in lockdown. So I'd wake up, once I got the blood flowing, I'd sit down, I'd write for at least 2,000 words, and then I'd go on with the rest of my day.
I've heard that from a lot of artists, authors, creators, is like, in some ways, COVID gave us permission to get back to like our passions that we wanted to, because for so many people couldn't do what they normally did. So that's really cool. Like that you had that time and space in an unfortunate way that.
Well, I mean, it was a blessing in disguise
Yeah.
because I mean, I love my company. They did everything they could to support us, but eventually, reality set in, and they had to let a lot of workers go. But because I was on workers' comp, they couldn't let me go.
Oh, life
So
hack. Life hack.
I was, being well taken care of throughout the entire process, and very grateful for that.
That's awesome.
And the horse and I, we share no ill will towards each other.
So do you still work with that horse?
Oh yeah, he's still there.
Do
The
you
horse
think
broke
he
you, though.
remembers that incident? Like,
Oh no,
No.
he does not. He does. Like, it was a blip in the radar for him. As soon as he got up, everything was back to normal for him.
What were your injuries though? Did you have like a torn ACL, like broken leg? What do you?
Every ligament was
Oh, my
basically
God.
destroyed. Actually, for a while, they wanted me to kind of like walk it off, and
You're like, I literally can't.
yeah. Well, I was walking, but I couldn't do more than that. And not medieval times, but the insurance companies, they were getting kind of mad that I wasn't getting cleared, and I'm like, guys, I can't do more than
I have
walk.
one leg right now.
Yeah, exactly. And so they're like, okay, fine. What we're going to do is we're going to get you a third party to check it out, make sure like what's going on in there. And if whatever they say, they say you still need physical therapy, we're going to give you not only physical therapy, but the best one we know of. It's going to be like a harsh 5-day training, like for hours on end. And I'm like, you know what? This is lockdown. I got nothing better to do anyway. So we went to go see that doctor, and he starts messing around with my leg, and he does something, and the entire lower half of my leg shifts off, like not like off, but like it dislocates. And I look up at him and I go, "That's not good." He's got like, this is a doctor, and his face like bleeds white, and goes,
white.
"Your PCL is done." So I basically had everything but the meniscus. Like I have cadaverous portions in there now, so I have my original meniscus, but all the other tendons and ligaments, they're all new. Well, slightly used.
Oh my gosh, that I cannot even imagine. I've heard knee things are one of the most painful injuries. So.
I mean, morphine didn't help, but it wasn't like I'm going to die pain.
That's good.
I think you might have a high threshold of pain.
Yeah.
Well, he's a knight. He's a knight. I mean,
And an
that'd be
unfortunate tolerance to opioids, I guess.
awesome.
I got all the
Make you
side
sick.
effects from morphine, but I didn't feel the pain relief.
That's the worst.
Oh gosh.
None of the fun stuff.
None of the fun stuff, all the bad stuff.
Oh, whoa. Okay. So Brett, tell me, what comes to mind when you hear the word mental health?
It's tough, but for me, I feel like mental health is a journey, and it's kind of a journey within yourself. And personally, I'm at the very beginning of that journey, because I think for a long time in my life, I ran from it and didn't want to be in touch with my feelings and what was going inside my head and my heart. So it kind of took, some crazy circumstances for me to actually get in touch with myself. And I don't know, I'm excited to finally be in a place where I can learn about myself and grow from it. So yeah, it's a journey.
Absolutely.
And I'm happy for you.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate you, Phil.
Appreciate you.
So, what I think about, so my business for the last, well, it's a year and a half old, but even before that, my passion has been around women entrepreneurship, and I do a lot of women empowerment stuff. And of course, I love it, and it's really awesome. And I've thought about mental health. I'm a integrative trauma specialist. I help people heal from trauma. It's been a big part of my healing process. I focus on my mental health. I know for myself, if I don't have my mental health, I don't really have anything. I focused on my children's mental health, important for them. But I've never really thought about men's mental health, right? Because you guys are knights and you're so strong and you can take on the world. And what I'm learning more and more is, I mean, the mass majority of people who die by suicide are men, right? And I think COVID, from what I'm seeing, more and more men, either they're realizing they can't run from it anymore, or they're beginning to realize, like, hey, I need to really get some help. So for you guys, like, how do you understand when, like, what do you do for your mental health practices? And then what happens in your body? I'm just so curious, as not being a man. I'm like, how do you recognize, like, hey, you know, I could really be a hermit crab and maybe it's not healthy. Like, I need to get out. Like, what do you guys do?
Well, I mean, one of the reasons why it so affects males is that we're taught from a young age to, like, keep in the feelings, but that doesn't mean we don't feel it. Like, we definitely know when something's wrong. The hard part is not being able to recognize it. But if you can recognize it, you go, okay, that's not healthy. What can I do to fix that? Like, a lot of times, I mean, I myself have been left alone with my thoughts more times than I felt I should. And it's like, it takes a while, but a minute goes by and you're like, wait a second, that's not right. You know, you start like even my character Eddie, he starts thinking thoughts that are nowhere near reality. And if you don't have the strength to tell yourself that and don't have anybody around to say, hey, that's not right. You know, it's very hard. So for me, when these feelings come up, I take a deep breath, try and figure out some way where I can, like, okay, this part of life is really stressful right now. I need to take a step back. That's the introvert in me. I need to take a step back from it. And I don't mean to push any beliefs on anybody. I personally believe in a higher power, and I pray to him and say, like, hey, what can I do? And as long as I'm listening, whether it be God or the universe talking to me, something comes up where it's just like, okay, I get it. That works. And usually it works out. I'm still here, so.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I think a big part of what's changing now is, like, the stigma around men's mental health. Like we talked about, you know, dudes usually are like, hey, we're tough. We don't have to worry about things. We don't have to think about our problems, or we just, you know, brush it off our shoulders. But now I think there's a lot more positive reinforcement out there saying, like, it's okay for a guy to have feelings. It's okay for a guy to cry. It's okay for a guy to not be okay. And I think for me, just starting to hear that more and more has been huge.
Yeah, that's another thing that, like, I didn't grow up with it myself. I'm not saying anything wrong with my parents, but it was a lot of, you know, shake it off type thing.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of things I've seen with new parents nowadays is making sure, like, taking a child who's having a tantrum over and say, hey, it's okay to have these feelings.
Exactly.
But we need to find a better way for you to use it.
But not in the grocery store. So
we need to find a different way to deal with these.
Exactly.
Absolutely. I think there is a big shift. And I'm so grateful for it. And I know that I'm careful. We have 2 boys. And it's been interesting for me to watch with you, Brett. Like, you're so careful and so empathetic for them, and yet, like, you were struggling yourself.
Oh yeah. Well, it's easier. It's easier to be empathetic of someone else because you can see it so clearly in front of you, and you can relate to them. And for me, it's a lot easier to solve someone else's problem than to. It's so much scarier to go inside my own soul and be like, what's wrong with you? Like, look in the mirror for a second.
Confirm.
Yeah, right. Right. It's way easier fixing someone else's problem. So
Yeah. For sure. So this makes me, I just want the audience, because Phil, you and I had a chance to talk, and I got to learn a little bit about your book and your character, Edward, right?
Mm-hmm.
Does he go by Eddie?
Hey, his friends call him Eddie. Most people call him Edward.
Okay. So I am not
You can't call him
formally
Eddie yet.
introducing
You call
You
him
can't
Eddie.
call him Eddie yet. You're not a friend.
I feel like we're still on Edward,
We're
but
Edward.
I want you to talk a little bit about your book and just don't give too much away, obviously, but just share about your book and the story and how it all came to be.
Well, I won't give too much away, but I'll stick around like the basis of it. I guess, well, a big thing was growing up, I was the fat kid. I know you probably can't see it now, but like...
no, you look like Fabio right now.
Thank you. It's the hair.
Yeah.
But growing up, I was on the larger side, and I was teased in school. It was bad, but it wasn't like, some people coming to beat me up type of bad. It was all just like verbal abuse. When I grew up in a time, it wasn't really social media, so that luckily I didn't get cyberbullied. But the character, Edward, he grew up in a time where Facebook and Instagram were a thing, and he tried it for a little while, and he had enough courage to say, okay, you know what, I'm not going to do that. But he gets teased throughout his life about his weight, mostly through other students, but also he lives in a small town in Georgia, and the grown-ups well-meaning, I'm sure, make comments on his weight, and obviously it doesn't feel good.
Right.
And when he turns 18, his mother had already passed away from cancer, and when he turns 18, his dad buys him a really cool car, because that's something that they have in common. They all both really, really like cars. Gets him a 1971 Chevy Corvette.
Which you can see the picture on your Instagram, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Yeah.
cool.
And it's a really cool car, and everybody who would not normally say two words to Edward's like, cool car,
Now
Edward.
he's got the car.
Yeah. And remember, it's also a very small town, so it's not like a huge population of kids, so word travels around really quick. And he has three main bullies that one of them actually used to be his friend growing up, and then they part ways like friends do, and he joins Edward's main bully, Zach, who...
It's always Zach, isn't
it's
it?
always Zach.
It's always Zach.
And you know that they always have both names. It's never just Zach. It's Zach Rowe or Brent Wheaton is the character in mine. But they see that, when he gets the car, a girl who he's grown up all of his life starts talking to him about it, and not just because of the car, about other stuff that happened. And Zach has a crush on this girl, and he sees that Edward is finally starting to make something of his life, and he says, "You know what? We got to put a stop to this.
Yep, can't have that.
Nope,
No.
can't do it." So actually, the girl Brittany, she asks Edward to prom. And things
Oh,
are
wow.
just finally starting to go right for him. And right as he's leaving for prom, Zach and his two cronies pop out of nowhere as he's leaving his house, and with the intent of tying him up to a tree and leaving him there until after the dance, so that Brittany thinks that he stood her up.
Oh, no.
And Zach plans to sneak in and be like, "Well, I'm here. I can take care of you." But what happens is Edward gets loose and hops into his car, but Zach starts seeing red, and they chase him down in their car. And Edward is not that experienced of a driver. This is his first car. He knows how to drive stick, but it's not very good at it yet. And he, in a moment of panic, takes a right turn onto an ill-used road, and he's just trying to get away from these people, and they're just toying with him. They have a much better car than he does, and they come up and they take little bites out of him, and then that's when it really starts cementing to Edward that things have taken a wide turn. And eventually, after a while, he loses control. They force him off the road, and he smashes his car
Oh, no.
around a tree. And that's not enough. All three of them get out and chase him into the forest. And one of my favorite lines that we've come through with all the editing stuff, Edward's just trying to back up, trying to get out. You can't do this to me. People are going to know. What have I ever done to you to deserve this? And Zach just smiles at him and goes, "You exist."
Wow. Wow.
And then Edward, trying to preserve his life, keeps backing up. But in one step, he doesn't find the floor. The terrain just slopes out underneath him. He falls into the forest, where he gets lost and left for dead by his bullies. And the bullies, they go back into town. Zach's father is a tow truck driver, and he comes back, picks up the car, moves it in a completely opposite direction, recreates the crash so that when they finally find the car and start a search for it, that Edward's not going to be anywhere near it.
Oh, no.
And when Edward wakes up, he's disoriented and he's trying to find his way out, but like he's got a giant gash on his eyebrow and he needs to take care of. He stumbles around the forest, eventually he stitches up his own eyebrow, is able to make fire, and he finds this one-room cabin out in the middle of nowhere. And he realizes that when he was driving, he found his way into the national park at the top of Georgia. It's the Georgian portion of the Appalachian Mountains.
Okay.
So he realizes that if he picks the wrong direction, he can walk for thousands of miles, as far as Maine.
He's out there. He's out there.
Without hitting any source of civilization. So he decides to stay put, and he finds the one-room cabin, and he's going to stay there for a while. And then he's starving, trying to find food. Once he finally figures it out, a fox comes and starts taking from his stores. And eventually, at first, it's just that he's getting all these traps and stuff. But when Edward stops setting traps and just fishing, the fox ends up coming into his cabin and taking his food from him before he gets the chance to eat it. So
he can't catch a break,
right? And when he finally catches a really good fish, he decides that this fox has got to go. And that's his first real victory of like taking out the fox and be like, okay, I think I can do this.
Now we got some momentum going.
But the whole time, I don't know, like human beings are not meant to be in isolation. That's not how we're built.
100%.
And he's stuck out there with nothing but the thoughts. And remember, he's been bullied all of his life. He's got a total of 3 people he can think of that were nice to him throughout his entire life. His dad, his best friend, and Brittany. And even Brittany is like a recent addition to that. So he's out there wondering what's going on, why they're not finding him. And he starts thinking, he's been out there a couple weeks, he starts thinking, well, maybe I should start trying to see if I can find a way out. And on his way up the mountain, as he's climbing, he sees another fox. And he goes, well, I can't just let this happen again. Let me see if I can. If I can take him out. And he ends up slipping on the slope again and slides partially down the hill, and he hits something that's hard but soft at the same time. And he looks up, and he slammed into this giant black bear who
my gosh.
obviously is startled by his presence, and he tries to get away and ends up falling down the mountain again. He gets a couple of slices into him, and he's banged up again, and ends up, when he finally makes his way back to his cabin, he can barely move. Luckily, he's stored up a couple of some food and water, so he can be by himself. But as he's recuperating, time passes and he's realizing that nobody's coming to get him. So finally, when he gets back onto his feet, he's fishing one day, and all these thoughts are just spiraling through his head, like people calling him fat names and making fun of him, all that. And he starts thinking, why do I want to go back? And it's just a thought at first, just like, why do I want to go back to all of that? And eventually he makes the choice that he wants to stay out there. And he's glad he made that choice, but the thoughts didn't go away.
Right.
And he's still out there all by himself with all these negative thoughts and thinking that because it's been 2 months at this point and nobody's come to get him. He hasn't seen hide nor tail of anybody searching for him, not even the sound of a chopper, and he's just wondering what's going on. And he starts flirting with the idea of suicide. He ends up making a noose, just a thought at first, and then eventually he starts playing what he calls Eddie Roulette. And that's where at night, throughout the day, he promises to preserve his life in all forms of way, go throughout his chores, get food, water, all that jazz. But at night, he puts the noose around his neck and tightens it until he passes out. And if he wakes up the next morning, he does it all over again. And if not, at least his problems are over. And that's that's his compromise, making it more fate than suicide.
Yeah.
And this goes on for about another 6 weeks until one morning, a spark comes out of his stove and lands on the floor and burns a hole in it. And when he puts out the fire, he realizes that the floor is hollow. He starts messing around with the boards, and an entire trapdoor comes up out of the floor. And he goes down there, and he sees it's like this huge room. Like the cabin's like a 10 by 10, and the room underneath is at least twice as big. And on one wall, there's a whole like side of casks with either a W or a B on it. And he opens up the B one, and it's beer.
Oh, man.
And he opens up the W one, and it's a whiskey.
Here we go.
Then he looks in another corner, and there's this whole pile, like this gigantic pile of leather-bound books. Like, to him, it's a treasure trove, an unending wealth of just, like, being able to escape. And in the final corner, there's this leather couch with a skeleton just laying on it. And on that couch, in his hand, there's a revolver. And there's a hole in the skull of that skeleton, and he starts thinking, well, how am I supposed to be able to go on if there's a tribute to giving up right below me? So he takes the skeleton up and buries it, and he just dives into this pile of books, and he loses himself in the realities of the books. There's like everything that you have up to 1931. And he finds this stack of journals, and it's about, at the time it was the Bureau of Investigation. It wasn't the FBI yet. This guy who grows up through the ranks and comes really close to J. Edgar Hoover. And at the time, J. Edgar Hoover was hard pressed to get rid of Henry Dillinger. Yep. This is during the times of Prohibition. And Agent Nell is tasked with with taking down one of the other gangs, and things happen with that, and he ends up in fear for his life. After Prohibition ends, the gang finds out that the government is buying up a whole bunch of gold, and they're going to store it at a fort in Kentucky. And so they're thinking it's a good idea. Hey, we should get some gold too. And when he thinks his cover is blown, and he doesn't want to go, and he doesn't trust the government he was working for, he ends up stealing a whole shipment of gold from this notorious gangster, and hides out in this little like storage place with all the whiskey and the beer because they don't need it anymore. Then he just hopes that they forgot about it. And then Edward starts looking around. It's like,
wait a second.
Yeah, and starts like maybe I missed it until now. Like there's like this huge stack of gold. And he goes through these like so many times. Years pass. And finally, he goes through the final journal again, and he sees 2 pages stuck together. It says chair. That's all it says.
You're not about to give away the ending, are you?
Away?
No, this is like halfway.
This is the first chapter.
Not the first chapter, but it is like the first half of the book. And finally, like he goes up to his chair. He finds this this map, and on one side of it, there's an X, and the other side it says to road. And he, for a second, he goes like, well, here's a way back to society. He feels like he could have found it if he like really tried, but like, again, it's hit or miss. But he sees the sign to road. He goes, well, there's a curious thing. Like if I want to, I can go back.
Yep.
And then he realizes that's the cave where the bear hangs out. He goes, well, okay, let me go check out the other end. It leads to the swamp, and he finds the tree with its marker, and he looks down into the swamp, and he goes fishing around in there, and he feels something metal, and he goes up, and he gets this image of in his brain of a armored Studebaker, and he can't open it or anything, but it gives him reasons to think, hey, maybe there is gold down there. So on his way back to his cabin, he thinks to himself, well, here is a way that I can absolutely get back, but I have to deal with the bear.
Yep.
Or I could try and find my own way, but that might take forever, or I could die in the attempt, or I could just stay here and wait for death anyway. So he decides.
That's life. That's life right there.
Yeah. And at this point, he's got 2 things going on in his head: get food and one day maybe take out the bullies that put him here.
Mm-hmm.
And now he figures that he might have the money to be able to do that. So he ends up playing one more game of Eddie Roulette and takes on a bear.
There we go.
When he finally gets past said bear, I won't tell you how or why, he makes his way back to the road and stumbles into a band of car thieves.
Oh no.
Yeah, but
And for the rest, you'll have to read. When is your book going to be available? Do you know?
It's going to be available, I think, in around January.
Okay.
Cool.
Sounds amazing. That's like a movie.
Okay.
Just you telling it. I'm like I'm
And that's
in
just a small
this
portion.
world.
I mean, one of the biggest things was like when the very first draft was like 160,000 words.
Oh,
And
so how long have you been writing for? Like,
I've been writing on and off for a few years now, but I didn't really sit down and make it a thing that I want to go for until a couple of years ago.
okay,
I knew when it kind of came out here that I wanted to change that into my profession.
gotcha.
So that brings me to my next question. Thank you for sharing that book. I'm so interested in two things that come to mind when you talk, because as you're talking, it's like these are real people to you, right? You recall like very specific details, and your character development is amazing. But for both of you, two things. One is putting yourself out there in an artistic way is an act of vulnerability, right?
Oh, yeah.
The scariest thing in the world, right?
Amen.
So one, I want you to talk to me about your thoughts on that and how you find the courage to do that. And then two, I'd love to know a little bit about like behind the scenes, like peel back the curtain, like your creative process for both of you, because you both create art in different ways. So Brett, why don't we start with you?
Yeah. I've definitely been hogging too much here.
I want to hear more about this book.
I know. Well, you can get it in January.
I can't wait.
It's
Around there.
How many pages? First, how many pages is it going to be?
Pages, I think it's going to be around 500, somewhere
yeah.
around there.
Yeah.
It's a good sized novel. Yeah.
It's a good size. It's not too big, but it's not like incredibly short either, which my editor has constantly reminded me of.
Absolutely. So Brett, tell
Yes.
me, how do you find the courage to put yourself out there?
Yeah, that's one thing I'm trying to discover right now. It's like the biggest hurdle for me, because that was what's keeping me from kind of living my true authentic self for so long, is that I was scared, and the fear kind of made me run from any part of my creative process or being, and I just shut it down, to be honest. I thought, fear of rejection, fear of, what happens if I put all of myself out there and everyone laughs at me. That's such a strong force against the creative process that it stopped me for a decade. And now, after everything I've been through recently, I've just kind of looked in the mirror and said, it's time to share your gift. It's time to accept that you have gifts, and maybe people will like it, maybe people won't, but at least you can live your true authentic self. So I think for me, the creative process is just expressing yourself and being okay with whatever it puts out. It doesn't have to, get applause at the end. It doesn't have to get likes on social media. It can just be, and it just be an expression of what's inside you.
I think that's so beautiful. And I think when we come from a place of creating, because it really is our soul's purpose, and like that's what we're here to do, it's different than we're doing something. It's like we're doing something for recognition or because that's where we can get into trouble, right? Then we're like every whatever can cause, we attach our self-worth to
and
that.
it's hard because the likes feel good. When you get a like, you're like,
It's
oh,
a little
someone.
serotonin.
But at the same time, it's like someone connects with you, and that's part of what you're looking for, is like, does anyone else feel this way? And just making that connection with another person is a really big part of it. So it's a balance.
Yeah. So Phil, have you always put yourself out here? I mean, you're a knight.
I have. So I guess it's kind of like a two-sided coin. Up until I was in high school, I projected putting myself out there. I never actually did. And then when I moved into the college level, they basically, they were like, everything you've been taught, that's wrong. And and it showed me why and how, and I completely agreed, and I started cringing. I mean, I had a lot of fun. Like my teacher, she was great, and I loved it, and she's a great person. But when I look back at the things that I used to do, I'm like, but I mean, that's part of the creative process. You got to be able to take the bad with the good,
Right.
take and I read something today, like if you look back and don't cringe at the stuff you used to do, that means you're not growing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
No growth.
And a big thing with putting myself out there was like, well, it does take a lot of courage. You have to be able to put yourself out there. I mean, for instance, when I finally finished the book, you can't give it. I mean, you can, but you can't give it to people you like because they won't give you like a full on like tear you to
Yeah,
shreds.
I loved it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not saying that they won't tell you like, well, this is where you should improve, but like one of the greatest and hardest things to do is find a professional editor.
Oh my.
And I love them to death because they're so freaking
You gotta swallow
ruthless.
that pill.
Because like things, they will nitpick you on the tiniest thing. And I have a process now when it comes to getting my editing back. Like when it finally gets there, I can't help it. I have to read what they have to say, but I make it a point. Don't touch anything until you have time to process
Oh,
it.
wow.
Yeah.
Don't,
That's a good idea.
Don't just shoot from the hip because you're going to make mistakes. You have to be able to let it wash over you, take a breath, realize that there isn't malicious intent behind these
That's such an important
comments.
reminder.
Oh, I know. Because every single time I get it back, it's just like,
So personal, right?
yeah, because this is your baby, right?
Yeah.
This is something you created out of thin air. And every time they mark something as like just needs improvement or just needs like a little nick or this doesn't match up with this, it's just like, because the thought of like, one, it didn't work, and two, you have to go back and fix it. It could seem like, you're coming up, you just got over one mountain and now you're looking at another one. And it's like when you're in that crevice, you're like, oh,
Yep.
I have to do this. And the only way you can get through it is by one step at a time. You got to push yourself. And I'm not saying I love to get these negative notes. I love what happens for them because like that, the you exist line.
Yeah.
It started off as it's more the fact that you exist. And I was like, that's a line from Harry Potter. It's a small line from Harry Potter, but it's still a line from Harry Potter. And I don't know how many people will get that. If you're a Potter nerd, you will get it. So I was like, I left it in to see what my editor said. And she changed it to you exist and we're tired of it. And I was like, I don't like that either. So I was like, how do I change it? And I just changed it to you exist. And I was like, oh. That's
There it
two
is.
So
words
powerful.
that express every intent
It's a
that that
gut
guy
punch.
has,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Absolutely. So talk to me, because there's two sides, right? Like you're putting yourself out there when you're performing at medieval times, and you're putting yourself out there as an author. And what I imagine is it feels different.
Oh yeah, very different. In fact, if you guys decide to just follow me on social media, I posted something right before I came in here. For the past 14 years, I have been doing promotional stuff for that company. Like I'm earlier this week, I was on Fox 10 for a weather segment that he was just promoting us, which was really cool. Very nice guy.
awesome.
We had a lot of fun. I got to play with horses and swords and taught him how to do some stuff. Today is the first time that I've ever promoted myself.
Wow.
This, like all that stuff, that's a character. This is me. This is
Yeah.
the first
Can't
time.
hide behind that character anymore.
No, this is the first time I've gone like completely public of just me.
Right.
Wow. How does it feel?
It was definitely scary going
Oh,
into
yeah.
it, but like
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
I've gotten in the mindset where so one of my favorite lines ever was a very small underrated Disney movie, Meet the Robinsons.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a
Their
good one.
motto is my absolute favorite: keep moving forward,
Yep.
which is a portion of what Walt Disney said.
Yeah.
And I felt to me that's not good enough. I changed it to keep pushing forward because it's not going to be easy just to move. You have
I love
to
that.
work hard at moving forward. It's not an easy process. You have to push, you have to break through.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Oh, sometimes you don't want to. Like this.
It's that looking, I was just like, oh man, I got to do this.
And I think that's the difference, though. It's between, like, because you can't get caught up into the negative. The toxicity side of that is, like, no matter what, like, the hustle, you just got to push forward, and then you get to burnout. But what you're talking about is when you're true in your passion or your purpose, and you know, like, it's going to be a hard journey, but you're aligned
Can't let
to
it stop you. Yeah.
I think that's the important difference. So Brett, talk to us a little bit about that, about finding your passion or rediscovering it. Really, it was a reintroduction.
Yeah.
And that process.
For sure. And it's kind of all revolves around what you mentioned just now of burnout. Is, I was working in the finance industry for a decade, and it's something I didn't care about at all. I had no passion for, and it's long hours of stuff I didn't care anything about. So I eventually got burnt out, and that kind of caused me to have a little bit of a breakdown. But the silver lining from that is it made me think about, what do I want with my life? What makes me happy? And what am I passionate about? And that got me back to art, really. I've always been interested in photography and films and music. Obviously, I went to the Conservatory of Recording Arts and Sciences, so I had that background. And I just felt like it was time to stop burying it and to actually face it and be real with what I wanted out of my life. And I just got the courage really to go back to it, and now I'm starting over again and kind of rediscovering my original passions, which is really an amazing experience right now.
Absolutely.
Have you ever read Terry Goodkind at all?
No.
He does a lot of different things, but there's this series that he does. It's called The Sword of Truth, and in the second novel, he talks about it's magic for him, but I think it's a good metaphor for the creative soul.
Yeah.
If you don't learn how to use it, it builds up to a lethal point inside you.
Exactly.
And
that happens. Yeah, that happened for sure.
And it's a perfect example. I mean, like, I'm trying to focus on getting this, and I've got like thousands of other stories. Like, hey, we need to be written.
Yeah, and it just forces itself.
Yeah, either that, and either you get it out yourself, or it finds another way.
It finds a way.
Yeah.
It finds a way for sure.
Absolutely, it finds a way. And I think so. I'm just genuinely curious, Brett. As you're doing this job that you have no passion for, like, at what point did you realize that? Like, what is that experience like? Is there a voice in your head every single day telling you, or are you able to quiet it?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, you quiet it for as long as you can, but it's always there, kind of poking and prodding. Like, what's the Edgar Allan Poe with the heartbeat underneath?
Telltale Heart.
Telltale Heart. It's like that. Like, you try your hardest to just forget about it. You're like, oh, I don't hear anything. I don't hear that heart beating at all. And that's kind of what it was. Is like you just you're honestly like killing yourself day by day. A piece of yourself dies when you're just not paying attention to what you're truly passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
And you can only take it for so long until you go crazy. And I did go crazy, to be honest. But when you can finally sit there, look in the mirror, and say, I'm destined for something else, it's really rewarding in the end.
Yeah, we need to find a better word than crazy, because that doesn't quite describe it.
Yeah.
But
I don't know. There's nothing wrong with being a little crazy.
Oh, no. I walk that line every day. Right?
Yeah. I feel like for people who are really creative, like both of you, and have an artistic soul, however you want to describe it, like, it's that fine line, right? Like, because you have to be able to, I feel like people like you get access different parts of your brain. I don't know if that's like really scientifically true, but it feels like there's different places. And so there's like always that balance of like in life, light and dark. But you think about the greatest creators on earth, right? They don't have these beautiful rosy lives, right? They usually have something that they're dealing with.
Tennessee Williams comes to mind.
Oh yeah, he's one of the greats. Huh?
Absolutely. So talk to me both about, like, what do you see for your future? What are your plans? What do you want to continue creating?
After you.
I'm trying to figure that out right now, so it's a little hard to answer. But I just want to be driven by kind of my love of photography. First and foremost is like my main thing, and then getting back to music, playing the guitar again and singing, something that I buried for a while that I'm slowly getting back into. And from a business perspective, try to use kind of my love of art and my skill there to help companies grow kind of their social media feeds, or marketing and branding, taking pictures for their companies, or making reels on Instagram for them, short films and things like that. So that's kind of my goal, is to start doing that.
Yeah, and we have some exciting things, right? What's the name of your company?
So Douglas & Douglas Productions is the media production company I just started, and you can find me on Instagram under Blended Brain Media. So starting that out, and we're moving into the offices around here in Mac 6 in the 1414 building. So
Nice.
yeah, super exciting.
So Phil, I hate this question so much, but some version of where do you see yourself in 5 years? Like, what is your vision for your future?
Well, as I've proved earlier, I can't be a knight forever. Like, I mean, I lost a knee. I recently got a nice gash on my eyebrow. I mean, I'm covered in, like, you can feel my right ear. There's a seam there where they had to reattach the top of it.
What?
Yeah, I've got tons of those stories. But
The night stories. We need another podcast for the night stories.
I have some night questions before we go, so
sounds
don't you worry.
good. But like, obviously, I can't be doing that forever. And I feel that writing is my future, and I'm already, like I said, I'm already got all these stories that are building up in my head. Like the next one is going to be like a Wizard of Oz meets Shutter Island, and I pitched
Sold.
it.
I'm in.
Right,
I'm
that's
in.
exactly what my editor said. She's like, I would definitely read that. And I'm like, well,
Who
let's get
wouldn't?
this
Yeah,
out
let's
so we
go.
can start writing
So
it.
stop sending me edits.
Well, no, never stop. You gotta, can't stop, won't stop, move. You know.
There we go.
There
There
we
we
go.
go.
So I want to continue with medieval as often as I can, because like it's an absolutely fun job. I love it, and even when I stop knighting, I still, like, every once in a while I do the regular talking parts in the show. I'm sure many of people listening here have seen me as the Lord Marshal or the Lord Chancellor. Hey, maybe even the Queen one day. Who knows?
Goals.
Never know. Yeah.
Right? I've got the hair.
You do.
You do have the hair.
thank you.
You do have the
So
hair.
a couple medieval night questions, just because.
Shoot.
Why not? It's not every day we have you here.
I know.
So we took our son, right? It was Jack's birthday.
Yep.
To medieval nights. So do you change colors, or do you always have one team?
I change colors every show.
Okay.
I do pretty much every part in the show. There are a couple of parts that, like, either I haven't done in a long time or I don't do, but those are like, I can count those on one hand.
Okay.
So every night you're like there's multiple shows a night,
Yes.
and then you're a different color every show.
Sometimes, a lot of times we just like we find it's easier just to do the same colors for the rest of the day, but it'll be different. It'll be a different position. So like, say I'll be the Blue Knight one show and I'm the bad guy, and I could be a Blue Knight the second show, but I'm like the
right.
one fight die guy.
It's like WWE. You guys plan it out like that and stuff, right?
I mean, sure, it's not planned at all. Hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
You're gonna get in
I
trouble
got it.
now.
Because our section when we went was
Blue
blue.
Knight. Blue Knight, baby.
So that was fun.
Was I there?
I think you were the
I
Blue
mean, you
Knight.
have to
I
be.
feel like you were.
feel like
Well, I mean, there are every once in a
You have
while,
off nights?
especially no. I'll be there, but I won't be in the show.
Okay.
Especially like on a Saturday. I mean, sometimes I do all 3 shows on Saturday, but they try to give you a show off just so
Yeah.
you can like rest and recoup. Especially because I do villain more than anything else because it's my favorite part, but it's also the most exhausting part.
yeah.
Was that the
bet.
villain when you guys came?
No, Blue Knight.
One, didn't
Yeah,
they?
he's a
He
good
won,
guy. I
and
think.
he
I
was a
think he
good.
won. Yeah.
He was a good guy.
Yeah.
But are the swords real?
They are. They are made of pure titanium.
So that's you really get cut.
How heavy are those?
The Mondo's about 8 pounds.
Okay.
When you first pick it up, you definitely feel it,
Feel
but
it,
once you
yeah.
start swinging it around a lot, it gets a lot easier.
I mean, the choreography alone is amazing.
Yeah.
Like, how
Oh,
do you guys? How long does it take to like set up a show? And do you guys change it up?
We do change it up. It all depends on how much you know. When you first become a knight, they teach you one fight, and you have to master that fight before you do another fight. Sometimes your next fight is just the same fight, but the other side of that fight.
Gotcha.
Mm.
Gotcha.
And the more you know, the higher up you are in the rankings.
Okay. Do you have to like squire before you become a knight?
You do.
You do?
Luckily, we've been blessed enough to have so many people I haven't had to squire in a while. But
Yeah.
obviously, like if we need to, I will still squire. But when you learn to become a knight, you have to start out as a squire.
Yeah.
We have this thing called knightitis. It's not a thing too bad at our castle. It's I came from the California castle, and I've seen some knightitis, man, where people are just like,
Everyone wants
I
to be the
never
knight,
squire.
yeah.
You know, no, it's beneath them. No, we are a team.
Gotta
These are your
start
brothers.
somewhere,
You are
yeah.
going to help them out.
Love that.
That's awesome. Well, it was an awesome show. We all really enjoyed it. My boys loved it.
Oh yeah, and when I first went, it was in New York, and I was like 5. I just fell in love instantly.
Oh, and that was with the Jersey Castle.
Yeah.
Go
yep.
you.
Yep.
Did you ever go as a child before you started working there?
I didn't actually know about it until the Cable Guy, which incidentally was filmed at the Buena Park location.
Oh, that's where you were.
That's where I was. Well, I didn't even really know where it was until I was looking for a job when I got into Cal State Fullerton.
Wow.
And I actually got in their sound and lighting department because I had come from, before that, I was the scenic director or the scenic designer and master carpenter of a small theater. And so I got in as a sound and lighting operator. And first night they have you watch the show. And I was looking down, I was like, I want to do that.
I'm that guy.
No
And
more
so I did.
lighting. I'm on stage. That's
Born
awesome.
to be a knight.
So we're almost out of time. So in wrapping up, I wanted to ask you guys the last question, which is if somebody is on a mental health journey, which I mean we all are, but is struggling right now, what is one resource or tool or piece of advice you would give them? So Brett, why don't we start with you?
I would just say find anyone to reach out to and talk to. Just say it out loud at first. What's going on with it? Don't keep it inside. You can't keep it inside. So talk to someone about your problems, whether it's a friend. Probably should be a therapist, but anyone at all that can listen. That's where it starts. Is just getting it out there. Don't let it be bottled inside forever, because that's where things go wrong. Another thing that's kind of, I feel like, underrated and was big for me is get sleep. Get a good amount of sleep and make sure you're getting a healthy rest every night, because that's one of the things that contributes to a lot of problems. If you're not sleeping, it can really do some messed up things to your brain. So those are two that are kind of personal to me and that I would recommend.
Good. Thank you.
Along with that, because that was definitely where my mind first went to, something that I really wish I could tell Eddie is don't listen to the negative thoughts.
Oh, yes.
We all have them.
Oh, yes.
We have a lot of them.
That's
and
hard. That's hard not to do.
I know.
Yeah.
And 99% of them are not true. But it's hard. And in no way am I saying this is easy.
Right.
It is not easy at all, but you have to work through it. You have to realize that this is not true. You have to work past it and realize that, especially if you go to a friend, your friend wants you to succeed. They'll help you realize, hey, that's not right. Don't listen to that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I always think about would you say that whatever you're saying to yourself, would you say that to your best friend? Probably not. So talk to yourself the way you would talk to your best friend.
Yeah.
I like that.
All right, so we are wrapping up, but before we go, I want to make sure everyone knows how to get in touch with you. So, Brett, how can people find you and connect with you?
Best way is probably Instagram. My ad is Blended Brain Media, so you can find me there. Also, if you want to send me an email, my email is brett@douglasanddouglas.com.
With Douglas, the first Douglas.
The first Douglas has 2 S's, and the second Douglas has 1, so I
Yes.
made it extra confusing for everybody.
Good. And how do we buy your book, Phil, and connect with you?
Okay, so this is kind of early in the journey, and but I definitely want to start getting the ball rolling. So the best way is to follow me on social media. I have both professional pages and personal pages. Like with Instagram, you just look up Philip La Croix. That's PHILIP. La Croix is LACROIX. Can't go wrong. You'll find me. You can add either one of those and then find the professional version of that on Facebook. And I will, if you send me messages through there, I will do everything I can to respond.
Awesome. And do you have an early interest list for your book, or?
Not yet. That is
That's
on the
coming.
list. Like my editors, we've got all these things going on. It's just not quite there yet. Right now, they're designing the cover and making the inside. Like they're choosing what font they want to use, the formatting and stuff. And once that's done, my buddy and I, who actually has made 2 movies, he and his wife, S&S Productions, they make movies, and they had Twice the Dream and Even in Dreams in actual movie theaters, and they're
Wow.
going to help me make an audiobook.
Oh, awesome.
Oh, that's awesome.
That'll be good.
Very cool. So make sure to follow both of these guys for some awesome art and inspiration, and buy Phil's book in January. January.
All right.
Make it,
I'll
make
make-
it so.
I'll
Make
it
sure
so.
that I'll make sure that Shonda knows this.
Yes.
Like, hey, we've got a deadline.
Yes.
It has to happen.
Thank you both.
Spoken into existence.
Exactly.
Yes.
Thank you both so much for
Yes.
joining me.
No, thank you, and thanks to Daryl on the 1s and 2s over there. Appreciate you.
Thank you all. I mean, this is a great experience, and I'm glad you guys were my first.
Yes,
Aw.
we did it.
You have been listening to the Messy Middle podcast and radio show, presented by Mother and Founder Co. We hope you have found a few pieces of wisdom to help you navigate your own messy middle. Be sure to subscribe to The Messy Middle on your favorite podcast platform. And follow Jen Burwell and Mother and Founder Co. on Instagram. Remember, beginnings are usually scary, and endings can sometimes be sad, but it's the middle that counts the most. Until next time, stay curious, kind, and messy.